preconceptions, and first contact. And that, cadets, is precisely why humans are classified as a Class 4 biological hazard in diplomatic situations. Professor Zara Vax's voice echoed through the amphitheater, her iridescent scales shifting from professional blue to cautionary amber as she gestured with 3 of her 4 arms. The holographic display behind her showed human physiological data, muscle density, endurance metrics, and reproductive statistics that caused several cadets to exchange nervous glances. They possess 3 times our physical strength, require minimal rest cycles, and most concerning, she paused for effect, tapping a control that highlighted a human endocrine system. They can mate at any time, without biological cycles or natural limitations. The auditorium, filled with the soft clicking sound of Trescan discomfort, exactly the reaction Zara wanted. After 15 cycles as the Galactic Confederation's leading xenobiologist specializing in human physiology, she knew how to make an impression on these impressionable officer candidates. A cadet in the front row raised a hesitant appendage. "Professor, if humans are so dangerous, why did the Confederation approve their membership application?" Zara's gill slits flared slightly, a sign of irritation she couldn't fully suppress. "Politics," she answered curtly. "Their technological advances in propulsion systems and their unique problem-solving capabilities make them valuable allies. But valuable does not mean safe." She closed her display with a swift gesture. "Class dismissed. Remember your field observation assignments. And those of you preparing for exchange programs with human institutions." Her scales darkened. "Review my safety protocols twice, not once." As the cadets filed out, Admiral Kellner entered from a side door, his aged scales a dignified silver green. "Impressive lecture as always, Professor Vax, though perhaps a bit severe." Zara began collecting her data crystals. "With respect, Admiral, I've had more direct contact with humans than anyone in the Confederation military. My evaluations are based on empirical data and personal experience," Kellner added quietly. Zara's movements stilled, her lower hands automatically rising to the scared tissue along her neck ridge, permanent reminder of her first encounter with humans 10 cycles ago. "My experience informs my expertise. Precisely why you've been selected." Kellner extended a sealed command cylinder, the kind used only for highest priority assignments. "Selected." Zara accepted the cylinder with reluctance, breaking the seal. Her pupils dilated as she scanned the contents. "This must be a mistake. A joint security mission with human military personnel during mating season. Not a mistake." Kellner's expression remained impassive. "The diplomatic corps requested you specifically. The human contingent arrives in 6 hours. I suggest you prepare." After the Admiral departed, Zara slumped into her chair, all 4 arms limp with dismay. After 5 cycles of carefully maintaining her distance from humans while studying them through secured channels and second-hand accounts, she was being thrown directly into their midst. And during mating season, no less. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The diplomatic shuttle reeked of human. Zara's sensitive olfactory receptors contracted painfully as she boarded, causing her protective membranes to slide over her eyes. After 15 minutes of disinfection protocols and pheromone suppressants, she still detected their distinctive scent, metallic with undertones of something she couldn't identify. "Professor Vax, welcome aboard the Concorde." Zara focused on the human approaching her. Female, approximately 1.7 meters tall, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. Ambassador Lin Chen, according to Zora's briefing materials. "Ambassador." Zora performed the formal Trescan greeting, deliberately keeping all 4 arms close to her body. She knew humans had a bizarre obsession with grasping appendages upon meeting, a practice she found both invasive and unhygienic. "We're honored to have the Confederation's foremost expert on cross-species relations join our mission." The ambassador smiled, revealing flat teeth, an expression Trescans found deeply unsettling. though Zara had studied it enough to recognize it as friendly rather than threatening. "I was not given much choice," Zara replied stiffly. "Ah." The ambassador's smile faltered slightly. "Well, let me introduce you to our security team. Commander Reed will be your liaison during the journey to Proxima Station." Before Zara could respond, a loud crash came from the cargo bay. "That would be the commander now," Ambassador Chen said with a sigh. "Excellent soldier, but sometimes a bit." A tall human emerged from the cargo hold, carrying what appeared to be Zara's personal storage container, as if it weighed nothing, which was impossible given that it contained her gravitational compensators and environmental regulators. "Got this sorted, Ambassador, though I'm curious why anyone needs this many technical devices for a 2-week. He stopped abruptly upon noticing Zara. "Professor Vax, Commander Alexander Reed, Earth Defense Force." Zara blinked rapidly, her scales inadvertently shifting to a confused purple. The human wasn't what she expected. Based on her studies, military humans were supposed to be bulky, aggressive, and loud. This one was lean, moved with unexpected grace, and spoke with a measured voice that somehow resonated with her secondary auditory membrane. "Those aren't technical devices," she said, immediately regretting her lack of composure. "They're environmental stabilizers. Your ship's atmosphere would damage my respiratory system without them." Instead of being offended, Commander Reed nodded thoughtfully. "Of course. The Trescan oxygen requirements. I should have realized." He set down her container with surprising care. "I've taken the liberty of adjusting the atmospheric composition in your quarters to match Trescan standards. 92% nitrogen, 7% oxygen, trace argon." Zara's gill slits flared in surprise. "You researched Trescan physiology. It seemed prudent, considering we'll be working together in potentially hazardous situations." He gestured toward the corridor. "Would you like to inspect your quarters before departure? We've tried to accommodate your environmental needs, but I'm sure there are details we've overlooked." For the first time in her career, Zara found herself momentarily speechless in the presence of a human. This was not according to protocol. Not at all. 3 standard days into the journey to Proxima Station, and Zara was begrudgingly updating her observational notes on humans, specifically on Commander Alexander Reed. "Computer, update xenobiological log. Human subcategory, entry 47. She murmured, pacing her quarters. "Subject displays unexpected adaptability to non-human customs. Has modified personal behaviors to accommodate Trescan biological needs without prompting. Possible diplomatic training beyond military standard." She paused, her scales shifting to a thoughtful green. "Subject has not once demonstrated the territorial dominance displays or physical intimidation commonly documented in human males." The computer chirped in acknowledgement as Zara collapsed onto her resting platform. Her mating cycle was progressing faster than anticipated. Perhaps it was the stress of the mission. Or maybe, though she hated to admit it, the constant proximity to humans was affecting her biology in unexpected ways. A gentle signal at her door disrupted her thoughts. "Professor, it's Commander Reed. Ambassador Chen asked me to deliver these security briefings before we arrive at the checkpoint." Zara quickly adjusted her formal covering, ensuring her now sensitive scale ridges were properly protected. "Enter." The door slid open, and Commander Reed stepped in holding a datapad. He immediately wrinkled his nose but quickly composed his expression. Zara felt her scales flush with embarrassment. Of course, her pre-mating pheromones would be detectable to him even with his limited human senses. "I can return later if this is an inconvenient time," he offered, maintaining a respectful distance from her resting area. "It's fine," she said curtly, extending her upper right arm for the datapad. "I'm perfectly capable of maintaining professional decorum regardless of my biological state." Reed handed her the device, careful not to make physical contact. "I never suggested otherwise, Professor." There was something in his tone, not mockery, but something else she couldn't identify. She noticed him studying her with unusual intensity. "What is it?" she demanded. Nothing, it's just. He hesitated. Your scales. The color change is remarkable. Zara instinctively touched the scales along her neck ridge, which she knew would be shifting from their normal blue to a deep, iridescent purple, a mating display meant to attract potential partners. How mortifying. A simple biological response, she said stiffly. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. Reed nodded but didn't immediately leave. Instead, he remained by the door, his expression thoughtful. You know, he said casually, when I was stationed on Rigel Prime, I served alongside a Trescan science team. They taught me something about your species biology. Zara narrowed her eyes. Did they now? Mem. Enough to know that what you're experiencing isn't comfortable. They had special meditation chambers, regulated atmospheric pressure to help manage the symptoms. We are not discussing this, Zara said sharply, but without the force she intended. Reed straightened. Of course. My apologies, Professor. He moved toward the door, then paused. Just so you know, the observation deck is unrestricted during third shift. The environmental controls can be adjusted to Trescan comfort levels, and the star field has a calming effect, or so I found. As he turned to leave, Zara felt a peculiar sensation in her secondary cardiovascular chamber. Not the usual contempt she harbored for humans, but something more complex. Commander, she called before she could stop herself. He paused at the doorway, looking back with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. Is the observation deck truly unoccupied during third shift? A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not entirely. Security protocols require at least one officer on duty. I have the watch tonight. Zara's scales rippled with an emotion she refused to name. Perhaps I'll review the star charts. For my research. For your research, he agreed with a nod that conveyed understanding without pity, a distinction Zara hadn't expected any human capable of making. After he left, Zara sank back onto her resting platform, her thoughts in disarray. This wasn't according to any protocol she'd established for herself. This wasn't scientific observation. This was something dangerous. The observation deck was dimly lit when Zara arrived, the vast transparency revealing the endless starfield beyond. Commander Reed stood at the viewing panel, his silhouette outlined against the cosmic panorama. He didn't turn as she approached, yet somehow she knew he was aware of her presence. You came, he said simply, still gazing outward. I said I would, Zora replied, keeping her voice professional despite the strange flutter in her tertiary respiration sac. The Cygnus arm is particularly visible from this position, Reed commented, gesturing toward a dense cluster of stars. Your homeworld is in that direction, isn't it? Approximately 200 light-years beyond what's visible, Zora confirmed, surprised by his astronomical knowledge. She moved to stand beside him, maintaining a careful distance. I assume Ambassador Chen briefed you on the Proxima Station protocols. Reed turned, his face half illuminated by starlight. She did. But I'd rather hear your perspective. My perspective is already documented in the mission briefing. Your official perspective, yes. Reed's voice lowered slightly. I'm more interested in what you actually think. Zara's scales rippled with indignation. Presumptuous. What makes you think there's a difference? Because, Reed said, stepping closer but still maintaining a respectful distance, I've read every one of your published papers, Professor. And I've read your military file. They don't match up. You've read my... Zora's scales flashed with alarm. That's classified information. Reed shrugged unapologetically. Security clearance. Need-to-know basis. And I needed to know who I was protecting. I don't need protection. She snapped, all four hands curling into fists. No, he agreed easily. But you might need someone who understands what actually happened on the GSV Harbinger. Zara felt as though she'd been doused in ice water. The Harbinger, the human exploration vessel where she'd gotten her scar, where she'd nearly died at human hands, or so her official report stated. How dare you? She hissed, her vocal sacs constricting with emotion. "You have no right. You protected them," Reed interrupted softly. "3 human children. You violated direct orders from your commanding officer and smuggled them to safety when he wanted to use them as hostages against the pirates." Zara's heart pounded erratically. No one knew this. No one except herself and those children, who would now be adults, if they'd survived. "The official report says you were attacked by the human crew," Reed continued. "But the scar tissue on your neck ridge, that's from a Centaurian phase blade. Pirates use those, not human explorers." "What do you want from me?" Zara demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Reed took another step closer, close enough that she could detect his unique scent, something earthy and unfamiliar, yet not unpleasant. "The truth," he said, "because this mission isn't what you think it is, and I need to know if you're really the person who would save 3 alien children at the risk of her own career, or if you're the xenophobe who teaches cadets that humans are dangerous breeding machines." Zara laughed bitterly. "Perhaps I'm both. Has your limited human psychology considered that possibility? That I can recognize the capacity for good in your species while still finding your reproduction practices abhorrent?" To her surprise, Reed laughed too, a warm sound that seemed to fill the cold observation deck. "Fair enough," he conceded. "And have you considered that I might find some of your customs equally bizarre? 4-month mating cycles tied to astronomical phenomena. Ritualized courtship displays involving mathematical proofs. From my perspective, that's pretty strange stuff." Despite herself, Zara felt her anger dissolving. "The mathematical proofs are traditional, not mandatory," she found herself explaining. "And they're elegant when done properly." "I'm sure they are," Reed said, his expression softening. "Just as some human courtship rituals can be beautiful when they're not being reduced to biological imperatives in a xenobiology lecture." "Touché, Commander," Zara conceded, finding herself strangely comfortable with this verbal sparring. "So what is this mission really about, if I'm being missiled?" Reed's expression grew serious. "The summit isn't just about trade agreements. There's going to be a proposal for a scientific exchange program designed to explore medical technologies that could benefit both our species. But someone doesn't want this research to proceed. Someone in your government. Or yours. Or both." Reed's eyes held hers. "What I do know is that there have been 3 security breaches at research facilities studying cross-species medicine, and intelligence suggests the next target is Proxima Station." Zara stared at him, suddenly seeing Commander Alexander Reed in an entirely new light. "I don't hate humans," she said finally. "I just don't understand them. But I'm beginning to think that might be my failing, not yours." His smile in response made something deep within her stir, something dangerous and thrilling and completely against all protocol. Understanding and connection. The diplomatic vessel shuddered violently, throwing Zara against the corridor wall. Her gravitational stabilizers whined in protest as emergency lights flashed crimson throughout the ship. "By the 7 moons," she hissed, regaining her balance just as the ship-wide comm system crackled to life. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have been intercepted by unmarked vessels. Hostiles have breached the lower deck. Security teams respond." Zara's military training kicked in instantly. She extended her defensive spines and moved swiftly toward the bridge, only to collide with Commander Reed rushing in the opposite direction. "Professor," relief flashed across his face. "Thank the stars. We need to get you to the secure sector immediately." "I'm not hiding while the ship is under attack," she snapped, attempting to push past him. "I'm trained in defensive operations and—" Another explosion rocked the ship, cutting off her protests. Reed pulled her down just as a section of ceiling collapsed where they'd been standing. "These aren't random pirates," he said urgently, his face inches from hers. "They're here for the exchange program research data, and possibly for you." "Me?" Zora's scales paled to a shocked white. "What could they possibly?" "Your research on human Trescan biological compatibility," Your papers may be officially critical of humans, but your actual lab data suggests possibilities that certain factions find threatening. Before she could respond, the ship lurched again. The lighting failed completely, plunging them into darkness for 3 terrifying seconds before the emergency systems engage. Ambassador Chen, Zara asked suddenly, realizing the human diplomat was nowhere to be seen. Secure room with the data if everything went according to plan. Reed pulled a compact pulse weapon from his holster and handed it to her. But we need to ensure her extraction. The rendezvous point is Deck C, Shuttle Bay 2. Zara accepted the weapon, surprisingly touched by this gesture of trust. Lead the way, Commander. They moved through the damaged ship in perfect sync, covering each other through smoke-filled corridors with a wordless efficiency that surprised them both. As they approached the shuttle bay, the sound of weapons fire intensified. Ambassador Chen is pinned down, Reed muttered, checking the tactical display on his wrist unit. 4 hostiles between us and her position. Zara studied the tactical display, her heart stuttering as she recognized the energy signatures. Those weapon configurations, they're Trescan military grade. My own people are behind this attack. Reed glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim emergency lighting. This is your moment, Professor. Where do your loyalties lie? With the truth, she replied without hesitation, her scales now a brilliant, determined purple. And apparently, with you humans. Together they burst into the corridor, moving with lethal coordination. Zara's superior agility complemented Reed's tactical precision perfectly. Within moments, 3 of the attackers were incapacitated, but the 4th got off a lucky shot. Reed fell with a grunt of pain, clutching his side where the energy pulse had grazed him. Zara felt an overwhelming rage surge through her body, a protective instinct she'd never experienced before. With primal ferocity, she launched herself at the final attacker, her combat training enhanced by something more primitive and powerful. When it was over, she rushed to Reed's side, using all 4 hands to assess his wound. "Don't you dare die on me, human," she commanded, applying pressure to the bleeding gash. He looked up at her with pain-filled but amused eyes. "It would take more than this to get rid of me." "You're delirious," she muttered, but felt relief flood through her as she realized the wound wasn't fatal. "Professor," he said suddenly, serious despite his pain, reaching up to touch her face near the scale ridge. "Your scales are changing again." Zara knew without looking that her scales would be displaying the unmistakable pattern of the Trescan bonding response, a physiological reaction that couldn't be faked or forced, a reaction she'd never experienced with any potential mate of her own species. "We have more important things to worry about right now," she said firmly, helping him to his feet, but she didn't deny what they both knew had happened between them. Some barriers, it seemed, were meant to be broken. The escape shuttle hurtled through space, its engines straining as Ambassador Chen piloted them away from the diplomatic vessel, now disabled and drifting. In the cramped medical bay, Zara applied regenerative gel to Reed's wound, her movements precise despite the shuttle's occasional turbulence. "They'll be sending pursuit craft," Zara said grimly, securing a bandage around Reed's torso. "My government doesn't give up easily, especially when they've committed this openly to sabotage." "Neither does mine," Chen called from the cockpit. "Confederation reinforcements are on the way. ETA 18 minutes if we can stay ahead of pursuit that long." Reed winced as he sat up, his hand instinctively finding Zara's. "The research data, is it secure?" "Encrypted and intact," the ambassador confirmed. "And now we have something even more valuable, a Trescan scientist with first-hand evidence of the conspiracy." Zara's scales darkened with concern. "I've betrayed my people." "No," Reed said firmly, squeezing her hand with surprising gentleness. "You've betrayed corrupt officials who fear change, not your people." Their moment was interrupted by the shuttle's alarm system blaring to life. "2 pursuit vessels closing fast," Chen shouted. "Defensive maneuvers won't be enough. They're military grade." Zara moved to the weapons console, her forearms working in perfect coordination across the unfamiliar human controls. I can target the propulsion systems without causing catastrophic damage. These are your colleagues, Reed reminded her, struggling to his feet to join her. Your friends, possibly. Zara's expression hardened. Friends don't fire on diplomatic vessels or conspire to keep species apart out of fear and prejudice. She hesitated, then added more softly, besides, I'm beginning to think my future lies in a different direction. Before Reed could respond, the shuttle rocked violently as enemy fire grazed their shields. Return fire authorized, Chen commanded, her diplomatic polish giving way to military authority. Disable only if possible. Zara's targeting was impeccable. The first pursuing vessel spun away, its engines crippled but life support intact. The second, however, evaded her shot and closed rapidly. We can't outrun them, Zara announced, frustration evident in her voice, and their shields are too strong for our weapons. Reed moved beside her, his tactical display showing the approaching enemy. Despite his injury, his mind was clear and focused. There's another option, if you trust me. Zara met his gaze, her scales shifting to a pattern of absolute trust. What do you need me to do? Something incredibly stupid and dangerous, he replied with a grin that, for the first time, Zara found more reassuring than alarming. Together, they executed a maneuver that combined human tactical ingenuity with Trescan navigational precision, using the shuttle's emergency atmospheric vents to create a carefully calculated vapor cloud, then igniting it with a low-level energy pulse to create a temporary sensory blind that confused the pursuers' targeting systems long enough for Confederation reinforcements to arrive. As the larger Confederation vessels secured their shuttle, Ambassador Chen turned to them both with a look of respectful admiration. I've never seen anything like that. Human and Trescan techniques perfectly synchronized. Reed moved beside her, his tactical display showing the approaching enemy. Despite his injury, his mind was clear and focused. There's another option, if you trust me. Zara met his gaze, her scales shifting to a pattern of absolute trust. What do you need me to do? Something incredibly stupid and dangerous, he replied with a grin that, for the first time, Zara found more reassuring than alarming. Together, they executed a maneuver that combined human tactical ingenuity with Trescan navigational precision, using the shuttle's emergency atmospheric vents to create a carefully calculated vapor cloud, then igniting it with a low-level energy pulse to create a temporary sensory blind that confused the pursuers' targeting systems long enough for Confederation reinforcements to arrive. As the larger Confederation vessels secured their shuttle, Ambassador Chen turned to them both with a look of respectful admiration. I've never seen anything like that. Human and Trescan techniques perfectly synchronized. A Trescan cadet raised all four hands in the traditional gesture of deep inquiry. But Professor, your early publications warned about human unpredictability and their constant reproductive capabilities. Were those observations incorrect? Reed stepped forward. Perhaps I can address that, he said, sharing another meaningful glance with Zara. Human adaptability and Trescan precision were once viewed as incompatible traits. We now understand them as complementary strengths. As the lecture concluded and the cadets filed out, Admiral Kellner entered from a side door, his aged scales now bearing the gold-edged markings of the High Council. Impressive lecture as always, Professor Vax, he commented, though quite different from your previous teachings. Zara's scales shifted to a serene pattern of contentment. My conclusions have evolved with new data, Admiral. So I see. Kellner's gaze moved meaningfully between her and Reed. The medical exchange program has yielded unexpected benefits. The best discoveries often come from unexpected places, Reed replied, moving to stand beside Zara, close enough that their arms almost touched. After the Admiral departed, Reed turned to Zara with a smile. Ready for dinner? I've been practicing that Trescan mathematical proof you showed me. Zara's scales rippled with delight. A courtship proof, "How traditional of you, Commander. I thought you might appreciate it," he replied, "though I hope you'll forgive any human errors in my calculations." As they walked together through the station's corridors, one human, one Trescan, but moving in perfect synchronization, Zara reflected on how completely her life had changed in less than a standard year. She had spent her career teaching others to fear what they didn't understand. Now she was learning, day by day, that understanding could transform fear into something much more profound. And as Reed's hand carefully brushed against her own, she realized that some lessons could only be learned through experience, a truth that applied equally to humans and Trescans alike.